The slander affair. This extremely painful incident took place on the Prophet's return from the expedition against Bani Mustalik. The Muslim army had to halt for a night at a place a short distance from Medina. In this expedition, the Prophet, PBUH, was accompanied by his noble and talented wife, Aisha, R. As it so happened, Aisha, R. went out some distance from the camp to attend to the call of nature. When she returned, she discovered that she had dropped her necklace somewhere. The necklace itself was of no great value, but as it was a loan from a friend, Aisha, R. went out again to search for it. On her return, to her great grief and mortification, the army had already marched away with the camel she was riding, her attendants thinking that she was in the litter as she was then thin, very young and light of weight. In her helplessness, she sat down and cried till sleep overpowered her. Safwan bin Mu'attal, an emigrant, who was coming in the rear, recognized her as he had seen her before the verse enjoining the veil was revealed, and brought her on his camel to Medina without saying a single word to her, himself walking behind the animal. The hypocrites of Medina, led by Abdullah bin Ubay bin Salul, sought to make capital out of this incident and spread a malicious scandal against Aisha, R. and, unfortunately, some of Muslims also became involved in it. On arrival in Medina, the Prophet, PBUH, held counsel with his companions, who pronounced different opinions ranging from divorce to retention. The incident almost roused a fight between two rival factions, Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj, but the Prophet's intervention silenced both parties in the sport. Aisha, R., unaware of the rumors being circulated, fell ill and was confined to bed for a month. On recovering, she heard of the slander and took permission to go and see her parents, seeking authentic news. She then burst into tears and stayed for 2 days and one sleepless night ceaselessly weeping to such an extent that she felt her liver was about to rip open. The Prophet, PBUH, visited her in that situation, and, after testifying to the oneness of Allah, he told her, "If you are innocent, Allah will acquit you, otherwise, you have to beg for His forgiveness and pardon." She stopped weeping and asked her parents to speak for her, but they had nothing to say, so she herself took the initiative and said, "Should I tell you I am innocent, and Allah knows that I am surely innocent, you will not believe me, and if I were to admit something of which Allah knows I am innocent, you will believe me, then I will have nothing to make recourse to except the words of the father of Prophet Yusuf, Joseph, so, for me, patience is most fitting. And it is Allah, alone, whose help can be sought against that which you assert." Al-Quran 12:18. She then turned away and lay down for some rest. At that decisive moment, the revelation came acquitting Aisha, R., of all the slanderous talk fabricated in this concern. Aisha, R., of course, was wholeheartedly joyful and praised Allah thankfully. Allah's words in this regard went as follows: "Verily, those who brought forth the slander against Aisha, R., the wife of the Prophet, PBUH, are a group among you." Al-Quran 24:11. The principal elements involved in the slander affair, Mr. bin Athatha, Hassan bin Thabit and Hannah bint Jahsh, were flogged with 80 stripes. As for the man who took the principal part, Abdullah bin Ubay, he was not flogged, either because the corporal punishment commutes the chastisement in store for him in the hereafter, and he does not deserve this merit, or for the same public interest for which he was not killed previously. He, moreover, became the butt of reproach and humiliation amongst his people after his real intentions had been unequivocally exposed to the public. Sahih al-Bukhari 1364,2 696-698, Zad al-Mad 2 113-115, Ibn Hisham 2 297-307. Almost a month later, the Messenger of Allah, PBUH, and Umar bin al-Khattab were engaged in the following talk: "Don't you see Umar, if I had had him, Abdullah bin Ubay, killed, a large number of dignitaries would have furiously hastened to fight for him. Now, on the contrary, if I ask them to kill him, they will do so out of their own free will. Umar replied, I swear by Allah that the Prophet's judgment is much more sound than mine. Ibn Hisham 293 delegations and expeditions following al-Muraisi Ghazwa 1. A military expedition led by Abdur Rahman bin Auf was dispatched to the habitation of Bani Kalb in Dumat al-Jandal in Shaban 6 Hijri. Before setting out, the Prophet, PBUH, summoned Abdur Rahman, and placed his hand on the latter's hand, invoking Allah's blessings and giving him commandments to act magnanimously during the war. He told him to marry the king's daughter if they obeyed him. Abdur Rahman stayed among those people for 3 days, invited them to Islam, and they responded positively. He then did marry the king's daughter Tamatar bint al-Asba. 2. In the same month and year, Ali bin Abi Talib was dispatched at the head of a platoon to the habitation of Bani Sa'd bin Bekr in a place called Falk. Prophet Muhammad, PBUH, had reported that those had rallied ranks to support the Jews. The Muslim fighters used to march in the day and lurk at night. On their way, they captured an enemy scout who admitted to being sent to the Khaybar tribe, to offer them support in return for their dates. Ali and his companions raided their encampment, and captured 500 camels and 2,000 goats, but Banu Sa'd, with their chieftain Wabr bin Alim, had fled away. 3. An expedition led by Abu Bakr as Siddiq or Zaid bin Haritha was dispatched to Wadi al-Qura in Ramadan 6 Hijri after Faizara Sept had made an attempt at the Prophet's life. Following the morning prayer, the detachment was given orders to raid the enemy. Some of them were killed and others were captured. Amongst the captives were Karefe and her beautiful daughter, who was sent to Makkah as a ransom for the release of some Muslim prisoners there. Karefe's attempts at the Prophet's life recoiled on her, and the 30 horsemen she had gathered and sustained to implement her evil scheme were all killed. 4. Anas bin Malik reported that some people belonging to a tribe of Uraina came to Allah's Messenger, PBUH, and made pretensions to Islam. They stayed in Medina but found its climate uncongenial, so they were asked to pitch their tents in the pastures nearby. They did so and were all right. They then fell on the Prophet's shepherd and killed him, turned apostates from Islam and drove off the camels. This news reached the Prophet, PBUH, who sent a group of 20 Muslims led by Qars bin Jabir al-Fihri on their track. They were brought and handed over to him. He had their hands and feet cut off, their eyes gouged out in recompense for their behavior, and then they were thrown on the stony ground until they died. Zad al-Ma'ad 122 biographers also reported Amr bin Umayyah ad-Damari and Salama bin Abi Salama to have been sent on an errand to kill Abu Sufyan, the chief of Quraysh, who had already sent a Bedouin to kill the Prophet, PBUH. The 2 men mission failed except for 3 polytheists killed on the way. It is noteworthy that all the foregone invasions did not imply real bitter fighting, they were rather skirmishes or punitive military maneuvers carried out to deter some enemies still unsubdued. Deep meditation on the development of war circumstances reveals the continuous collapse of the morale among the enemies of Islam, who had come to understand that they were no longer in a position to contain the Islamic call or weaken its active drive. This state of affairs reached its climax in Al-Hudaybiyah Treaty when the 2 belligerent parties, believers and disbelievers, entered into a truce agreement that pointed markedly to the ever-growing power of Islam and recorded unequivocally the perpetuity of this heavenly religion in Pan-Arabia. Al-Hudaybiyah Treaty Dil Qa 6 Ah. When Arabia began to witness the large impressive sweep in favor of the Muslims, the forerunners of the great conquest and success of the Islamic call started gradually to loom on the demographic horizon, and the true believers restored their undisputed right to observe worship in the sacred sanctuary. It was about the 6th year of Hijri when the Prophet, PBUH, saw in a dream, while he was still in Medina, that he had entered the sacred sanctuary in Makkah in security with his followers, and was performing the ceremonies of Umrah, lesser pilgrimage. Their heads were being shaved and their hair cut off. As soon as he informed some of his companions of the contents of his dream, Their hearts leapt up with joy since they found in it the actualization of their deep longing to take part in the pilgrimage and its hallowed rites after an exile of 6 years. The Prophet, PBUH, had his clothes washed, mounted his camel and marched out towards Makkah at the head of 1,500 Muslims including his wife Salama. Some desert Bedouins whose faith was lukewarm hung back and made excuses. They carried no weapons with them except sheathed swords because they had no intention of fighting. Ibn Maktum was mandated to dispose of the affairs of Medina during the Prophet's absence. As they approached Makkah, and in a place called the Hulayfa, he ordered that the sacrificial animals be garlanded, and all believers donned al-ihram, the pilgrim's garb. He dispatched reconnoitering to hunt around for news of the enemy. The man came back to tell the Prophet, PBUH, that a large number of slaves, as well as a huge army, were gathered to oppose him and that the road to Makkah was completely blocked. The Prophet, PBUH, consulted his companions, who were of the opinion that they would fight none unless they were debarred from performing their pilgrimage.